Hello everyone, first news update for 26th of March. Now it's about 9 o'clock in the morning Moscow time, and I will start this update with a little more details in regards to recently agreed partial ceasefire that is connected with their strikes on energy facilities. So we have this article on our team. Russia and US agree list of energy facilities for a truce with Ukraine. So the Kremlin has released a comprehensive list of energy facilities subject to a temporary US brokered truce between Russia and Ukraine. And well, I have to pause here because I don't really like wording of this sentence, because it seems like RT is trying, maybe unintentionally, to downgrade involvement of US in this proxy war against Russia and harm that was done to Russia and Russian citizens by criminal activities or hostile activities of the US, as a result of which tens of thousands of Russian citizens died, by the way, tens of thousands of militaries and civilians. And such a warning, to me personally, is completely unacceptable. US didn't broker nothing. US is a hostile state, and the US is waging proxy war against Russia, right? US and other NATO member states are waging proxy war against Russia, and Ukraine is just a proxy for them. It's their proxy. So this partial truce was reached on the US initiative and between their hostile countries, between the countries that are engaged in this hostilities. On one hand, on one side is US and other NATO member states and their proxy, so-called Ukraine, and on the other side it's us, Russia, right? So US didn't broker nothing between Russia and Ukraine, because Ukraine is not some sovereign actor in this conflict. It's a proxy, and war is between NATO and Russia. And I believe such a language should be condemned when whatever public figure or media outlet is trying, maybe yet again unintentionally, to downgrade criminal activity of their US leadership and the US as a state, because this leadership is acting on the name of state, right? Not as a private citizens. So such a attempt to downgrade harm that was done to Russia by US, while positioning United States as a sort of mediator is completely unacceptable. It's outrageous. And public should pay more attention to this stuff. Just because currently US administration is playing some games, and at least publicly in statements are saying that they want to de-escalate, does not mean that whatever harm was done by US should be forgiven or forgotten. Let's go through some details. Anyways, the pause in long-range strikes against such targets took effect on March 18 and will last for 30 days, according to Moscow. The types of facilities covered under the truce include oil and gas processing and storage facilities, including pumping stations and pipelines, electricity producing and distributing sites, nuclear power plants, and dams of hydroelectric plants. The truce may be prolonged beyond the 30 days period should both sides agree, Moscow noted. If either party violates the deal, the other can consider itself free from its obligations, it added. And if so, then why Moscow is still acting is if is obligated to this partial ceasefire, when we all know perfectly well that every single day after March 18, Kiev regime and its NATO backers were violating this ceasefire, literally every single day. And this was reported, this was documented and reported by Russian Defense Ministry, Foreign Ministry, and Kremlin itself. And statements were made about it. So you tell me, dear friends, what is going on? Because to me, this is quite confusing. Because Russian high-ranking officials, Russian state institutions already stated that Kyiv regime is violating this ceasefire, and their cases are documented, right? And still, for whatever reason, Moscow feels like it is obligated to this agreement, which is wrong in my opinion. Russia should not be obligated by this to this so-called agreement no longer, because yet again, Kyiv regime violates this truce every single day. So I don't know, man. More and more confusion in regards to these talks between Russia and their enemies of Russia, and unfortunately, risks that Russia will end up in this negotiating traps and eventually West will manage to gain some time with these talks is increasing. They will fool us again. Let's be real here. They fooled us before with their Minsk 1, Minsk 2 agreements, with their Istanbul talks and preliminary agreement that was there reached, and they will try to fool us again, and they are trying, by the way, and already doing this, isn't it? Because Russia feels like Russian leadership, for whatever reason, feels like they are obligated to act based on this agreement on partial truce, while the regime is violating it every single day. This is crazy, man. I mean, I don't understand what the hell is going on, and unfortunately, there is a high risk that West will fool us even more, because we are about to witness Grain Deal 2, Grain Deal 2.0, because there were some agreements reached on Black Sea topic also. And for example, RIA Novosti is reporting that Kremlin has published the results of the meeting of the Russian and US expert groups in Riyadh. You remember I reported in previous updates that Peskov, press spokesman of the Russian president, stated that no additional information will be released in regards to these negotiations in Riyadh, because it was a technical negotiations and deep dive into some issues or some details, and these details not necessarily needs to be public, but something had changed, I guess, after Peskov's that statement, and later afternoon yesterday, Kremlin released additional information, Peskov himself actually. Let's go through details here. So, Presidential Press Secretary Dmitry Peskov gave details of talks between American and Russian delegations in Riyadh. Among other things, the Black Sea Initiative, that's a Grain Deal 2.0, by the way, and the ban on strikes on energy facilities. The Kremlin's main statements are in the RIA Novosti's article, and let's go through these points. Russia and the United States have agreed to develop measures to prohibit attacks on energy facilities in Russia and Ukraine. I already mentioned this. We agreed to develop measures to implement the agreement between the presidents of two countries on the ban of strikes on energy facilities in Russia and Ukraine for a period of 30 days starting on March 18, 2025. With the possibility of extending and withdrawing from the agreement in the event of non-compliance by one of the parties. Moscow and Washington agreed to ensure the implementation of the Black Sea Initiative. It involves ensuring the safety of navigation and preventing the use of commercial vessels for military purposes. The United States will help restore access for Russian agricultural and fertilizer exports to world market, reduce the cost of shipping insurance, and expand access to ports and the payment systems to conduct such transactions. Well, some Russian banks, according to this preliminary agreement, should be reconnected with the SWIFT, which is a main Western system of exchange of information between the banks and Either all Russian banks or vast majority of them are disconnected from SWIFT for a while now. And by the way, does this few points that I already mentioned reminds you anything? Green Deal, for example. We all remember, isn't it, that West, US included, didn't honor it agreements that was reached during that first Green Deal. And now, for whatever reason, man, I mean, this is crazy. Moscow is moving forward to end up in this trap once again. I just cannot wrap my mind around this nonsense, because how can Putin or anybody in Russian leadership trust Western politicians or the Western political class or their leadership? I mean, how? This is nonsense, right? They will say anything, literally anything, but they would not honor their statements and their agreements that they will sign up for. We all know this perfectly well, isn't it? But still, Russian leadership is moving rapidly towards that trap. Anyways, this is crazy, man. This is crazy. I don't support this nonsense. I will never support, but well, it's not me decision maker, isn't it? And I'm quite sure significant number of citizens here in Russia are on same page with me on this topic. How many times we gonna be fooled by their Western elites to learn the lesson? I mean, like 10 times, 20 times, 50 times, 100 times. Where is the number after which we will act a little more cautiously and stop trusting these psychos that are our enemies, actually? Anyways, the agreement from the Black Sea Initiative will come into force after the lifting of sanctions against Russian producers and exporters, including fish products and fertilizers. Dream about it. Dream about it. They're not gonna lift no sanctions, by the way. This is all nonsense. No, they're gonna play around. They're gonna promise many things, and they're not gonna honor these promises. Just mark my words, dear friends. That's how it's going to be. After the lifting of restrictions on the work of insurance companies with their food cargo, and after the lifting of sanctions against Bank and other financial organizations involved in ensuring operations on international trade in food and fertilizers, their connection to swifter opening of necessary correspondent accounts. Also, according to this agreement, there should be lifting of the restrictions on servicing in the ports of the ships under the Russian flag involved in the food trade, lifting restrictions on the supply of agricultural machinery and other goods used in food production to Russia. Russia and United States will continue to work to achieve a strong and lasting peace. Yeah. The day before an expert meeting of the technical teams of Russia and the United States took place in Riyadh. It lasted more than 12 hours. Moscow was represented by the head of the International Committee of the Federation Council, Senator Grigory Karasin, and their advisor to director of the FSB, Sergei Beseda. Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said that the parties discussed the issue of navigation safety in the Black Sea during the talks. Russia, according to him, advocated resuming the Black Sea Initiative in a form more acceptable to all. At the same time, the minister noted Moscow cannot take the Kiev regime at its words on this issue. As the diplomat pointed out, the grain and fertilizer markets must be predictable, since Russia not only wants to make legitimate profit, but is also concerned about food security in the world, in Africa, other parts of the world. And Lavrov has a point that Moscow cannot take any statements or agreements that Kiev regime will sign up for for face value, because they will lie for sure. But one should add that Moscow cannot trust Washington, London, Paris, Berlin, or other Western capitals also. Cannot. This cannot happen. Right? Not now, not in decades, not ever. I mean, Western ruling class demonstrated million times that they are existential threat for Russia and for Russian citizens, and they should be treated as an enemy forever, always, as long as they exist. That's my point. Right? I don't believe Western societies will be able to regain control over their countries or have some serious influence on the political class or political processes. This is not happening, by the way. Vast majority of societies in the West are in deep sleep and under heavy influence of propaganda. They will never wake up. Never. And the informed minorities that actually exist in the Western states, they are, unfortunately, they are not influential enough. They cannot really influence the processes, right? They cannot wake up the fellow citizens. They cannot influence the so-called political class or their elites there. So therefore, Western ruling class gonna stay the same for decades to come at least. And therefore, as long as this is the case, Russia should always treat them as an existential threat and they're hostile, right? Because they are. You already noticed my negative attitude towards all this BS, right? This is nonsense, by the way. Grain Deal 2.0, mark my word. US not gonna honor none of their points that were preliminary agreed during those talks a few days ago in Riyadh, or any other agreement, by the way. It's just not happening. And if anybody really trusts, if anybody in Russian leadership really trusts US political class or political class in Europe, then those people should not be in the leadership of the country. Simple as that, period. Also, Vzгляд newspaper is reporting that, Kremlin pointed out that Black Sea initiative will come to force after some sanctions on Russia are lifted, which is never going to happen. So Russia and the United States agree at their meeting in Riyadh to implement their Black Sea initiative, which includes measures to ensure the safety of their shipping. I already spoke about this stuff, and Kremlin is saying that I guess to calm down people here in Russia that have questions, Kremlin is trying to say that we will only act based on these agreements when some sanctions are lifted on Russia. It's nonsense, man. It's just freaking nonsense. Okay, they will lift sanction on Bank. And what? Kiev will start receiving weapons and munition through Black Sea in huge volumes, right? And this is a big topic because NATO member states are struggling to supply Kiev regime, for example, through Danube River, because portal infrastructure in the cities of Odessa region that are on the bank of Danube River is almost completely destroyed. And through roads, by the way, it just takes much longer. And now, Russia seems like is agreed to open for NATO wide door to transfer whatever weapons they want to transfer to Kiev regime and whatever munition. This is a Grain Deal 2.0, by the way. And if we are that stupid to end up in that trap once again, then probably we deserve no better. That's it, man. And RT is also reporting that, Lavrov stated that Russia needs US guarantees to revive Black Sea grain deal. Moscow must receive firm guarantees from the US to renew their defunct Black Sea grain initiative. Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said in an interview with the Channel One on Tuesday, Russia did not renew the deal in 2023 after Western restrictions on its exports were not lifted. And why do you think anything will be different now? Because Trump is playing some games and trying to fool Russians, to fool everybody, and Russians included, that he is for the escalation. I mean, really? That's why U.S. is sending weapons to Kiev regime and munition, and sharing intelligence with Kiev regime. Is that a demonstration of U.S. willingness to de-escalate, or am I missing something here? And in these topics, by the way, that I already mentioned, there was not a single word about ending of military aid for Western-backed terrorist regime or the sharing of the intelligence. Not a single word about that, right? Just some freaking promises that some sanctions will be lifted, and the Russian, and they will not create some additional barriers or remove some of the barriers that already exist for Russian food exports. Russia is exporting food anyways. Russia is exporting food anyways, and Russia is one of the biggest breadbaskets of this world, right? So all this stuff is nonsense, by the way. Pure nonsense. That's what it is. Too bad, man. Too bad. Until US ends any supplies of weapons, or all supplies of weapons to Kiev regime, until US will end their intelligence sharing, and until US will stop being a part of this proxy war for real, there can be no agreements in the place between Russia and the US, between Moscow and Washington. Should not be, right? But yet again, I mean, tell this to Putin and his associates, man. They clearly think differently. Thanks God I never vote for this guy, man. TASS news agencies reports that Russian ambassador Darchiev to leave for US on March 26. Russian ambassador to Washington, Alexander Darchiev, will leave for the United States on March 26. This was reported to TASS by source. Yet again, I think too early, in my personal opinion, to send Russian ambassador to US, because yet again, US is an enemy of Russia, right? US is leading this proxy war against Russia. And I think low-level diplomat, presence of low-level diplomats in Russian embassy in Washington will be enough in current situation. Why Russia is sending ambassador? Is if relationships between two countries are okay? No, it's not okay. So, mistake, in my personal opinion. Yet another one, but Hello everyone, if you find this video informative and interesting, if you like my work in general, please consider to support this independent media project from Russia. You can do it through several means, through PayPal with donations, or by subscribing to my Patreon and Boosty pages, where you can have access to full news updates. Links are on this video in the description box and in the pinned comment. Thank you.